Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I want to talk about realism in science fiction wargames. So this week I want to address another subscriber question, but this is one that I received well over a year ago. I started responding at the time, and for reasons that have been lost to time, I didn't finish it, and I've only just rediscovered the question. So Ashley Pollard asked, can science fiction or fantasy war games be realistic, as in plausible to play as a war game that has no historical foundations to draw upon? Feel free to not take the poison chalice, she added. So let me start by apologising for taking so long to respond to this question, and by setting some parameters to my answer. Now, I think the reason I found this a difficult one to respond to is there's different ways to address the question of whether of realism in sci-fi war games and whether that can work as a game. There's the historical foundation of the story as mentioned in the question, but you can't discuss science fiction without addressing technology and how that translates onto the games table. But first, I want to discuss a slightly tangential question. Can the high concepts of some science fiction ever be translated into a game? And if they can, would it even work? Now, I love science fiction as a genre. Aside from historical movies, sci-fi is probably my favourite genre of films and literature. I really enjoy the fantastic and brain-bending what-ifs that science fiction can explore. And my favourite writers include, of course, the likes of Asimov, Philip K. Dick, Ian Banks, Anne McCaffrey, Edgar Rice Burroughs, H.G. Wells, of course, to name but a few. And as you can tell from my list, my tastes are eclectic and include many stories that have already been translated into movies or TV series, and occasionally into games of one type or one or another. But amongst the works of these authors, there's also some stories that I think that would be near impossible to translate into a film, and while great sci-fi do not necessarily equal great games. Now, an example of this would be something like Anne McCaffrey's 1982 novel The Crystal Singer. Now, I loved this book when I first read it, dealing as it did with life-changing decisions, trauma, rediscovery, as well as exploring dangerous otherworldly frontiers. But it's hardly game material. I mean, back in the early 80s, my mates and I went to a role-playing convention in Essex where a club was running a wide range of science fiction games, role-playing games like Traveller, Judge Dredd, along with some home-brewed role-playing games that the people there had written. And one of these that caught my eye was based on The Crystal Singer. And because I loved the book, I decided I'd give the game a try. Now, while I enjoyed the source material, it has to be said that a game based on mining crystals on an alien moon by using voice-modulated cutting equipment was unlikely to be gripping, and so it proved to be. This was partly because some of the concepts in the book didn't translate into exciting gameplay, and partly because most of the nuance of the story, the politics, the technical challenges, and the emotional trauma of the lead character just couldn't be conveyed in a game. And this for me perfectly illustrated that just because a sci-fi story makes great science fiction doesn't mean it can work as a game. So having decided that there are some sci-fi stories that are near impossible to translate into games, the next question is, can the technology of the far future ever be realistic on the games table? However, it's important to clarify what I mean by realistic when addressing this question. You know, there are a few exceptions, such as the basic sci-fi tropes like faster than light drives and time travel, which are, are impossible with our current understanding of physics, and without which great swathes of science fiction are just wouldn't exist. All that literature just wouldn't exist. But for all other technologies, realism usually means adherence to the known laws of physics, or at the very least plausible extrapolations of it and of current technology, and relatable human behaviours and politics. Now, given this definition, I believe it's possible to turn most science fiction stories into tabletop games of one kind or another, if the story is sufficiently engaging and translatable. So science fiction by its nature is speculative, but it often stems from current scientific understanding and extrapolates future possibilities. A sci-fi tabletop wargame can achieve realism by grounding its mechanics and its lore in established scientific principles. For example, while faster than light travel might be necessary concession for the sake of the narrative and gameplay, other technologies and their implications can be based on realistic scientific theories and current technological trends. It's easier when dealing with near future settings, of course, where a game can incorporate technologies that are currently in development or on the horizon. Consider things like drones and cyber warfare, AI, robotics, advanced prosthetics, all of which were science fiction just a few decades ago. And I think the challenge with translating a sci-fi story into a game is to avoid magic tech explanations for why stuff works, because then you're diverging from reality in a very, very visible way. So having made a case for realism, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here and also say that designers striving for realism must also consider playability. Overly complex rules or too much emphasis on extreme realism can detract from the enjoyment of the game itself. Balance, as in any other game, whether that be historical, fantasy or sci-fi, is crucial if the game is going to be playable, engaging and enjoyable. With that caveat aside, I think sci-fi wargames can indeed achieve a significant degree of realism by grounding technology, physics, politics, human behaviours in believable principles. So finally, I want to address the specifics of Ashley's question about realism when a game setting lacks a real historical foundation. Now, for historical wargames, realism is achieved by closely simulating known events, weapons, tactics and such like. However, sci-fi wargames set in speculative or futuristic universes lack that direct link to a real history, and so is it even possible to call a sci-fi game realistic at all? Well, even without historical reference points, I think science fiction wargames can feel realistic if its rules and world building are internally consistent. So, as I've already discussed, if a game features advanced technology, the capabilities and limitations of that technology must be grounded in plausible physics, clearly defined and applied consistently throughout the game. Now, this helps create a sense of immersion and logic within the game's universe, and the more a game follows its own rules of physics, society and warfare, the more real it can feel to players, even if the setting is entirely made up. Now, another way to make a sci-fi wargame feel more realistic is by borrowing real-world military strategies such as flanking manoeuvres, cover supply lines and combined arms warfare, even if the factions and the equipment are fantastical. And while sci-fi wargames can be set in the far future of another galaxy, if the game attempts to portray the human experience in a recognisable way, it can feel even more real as a result. Factors like command and control, morale, fatigue and communication breakdowns can be integrated into the gameplay to enhance realism even in a science fiction setting. So what do you think? Can science fiction wargames ever be realistic? And indeed, should they be? You'll notice that I have deliberately avoided making eye contact with the elephant in the room and have not discussed a certain grimdark universe 40,000 years in the future. However, if you want to prise the lid off that particular can of worms, its players can be very protective of their game after all, then have at it. As always, I'd love to hear what you think in the comments below. So time for a hobby update, and from the far reaches of space we pull back to the early medieval period of my new project. Last week I mentioned that I had mounted all my figures on lolly sticks ready for priming, and they're still awaiting priming, partly because the weather hasn't been suitable and partly because I've been really busy and I was away out most of the weekend. So having spent a large chunk of the summer inside one medical facility or another, I think the wife and I just desperately wanted to get out and about for a bit of fresh air at the weekend. So we went back to Chatham Dockyard and attended their Salute to the 1940s event. Now, this is a mix of music, living history, military vehicles, and in previous years has been really well attended both by exhibitors and visitors alike. nice weather ensured good attendance, but I have to say the exhibitors were a bit thin on the ground compared to previous years. I mean, that being said, it was still nice just to get out in the early autumn sun, stretch our legs and spend a bit of time together. Then on Monday, the rejects gathered online for our weekly paint and chat session. Now, we have a few games coming up, some in person, others via Zoom, and we were looking at opportunities for shows later in the year. Personally, I'm hoping to attend Partisan in October, possibly Warfare in November. I'm not really sure about that. There's also a role-playing convention called Dragon Meet right at the end of November that I'm hoping to attend with my daughters and my son-in-law. Now, this particular event is usually an eclectic selection of traders selling all sorts of role-playing games, models and accessories. And falling as it does just a few weeks before Christmas is a good opportunity for some present shopping. Now, Friday was D&D night. Now, I've missed a few sessions, so it's been a while, and it was great to see the guys and just roll some dice again, albeit on a screen. The only downside with such a long period between games is trying to remember what we've been doing, all those little clues and snippets of information that will become important in the games to come. Fortunately, I always keep a game diary and scribble notes as the game progresses, and our DM, Andrew, also keeps a campaign diary online which we can refer to. Needless to say, after such a long break, I had a significant amount of reading to do before the game, and if I thought my spider scrawl note-taking was hard to understand one week to the next, it was near impossible to figure out what I'd written well over a month ago. Nonetheless, we had a great game as our party of adventurers head off on another side quest to be continued in a couple of weeks' time. Time for a very quick Workbench update. I've been getting a few items painted, as you can probably tell, mostly 6mm terrain items for use with my awards of the Roses models. I've completed a couple of sets of pavés from Irregular, as well as a couple of wooden bridges. Nothing spectacular, just some little items that I needed. Actually, these were originally, the bridges were originally pontoon bridges, but I've removed the boats and turned them into just simple wooden structures for crossing streams and small rivers. And I've also completed a handful of civilian figures and some hay carts that were part of my Slug Industries set that I bought a while back, all of which will be used as scatter terrain in future games. Now, time for a book review, and in keeping with the theme for this week's talking point, I thought I would review a book that I bought a few months ago. Now, John Lamshed's Sci-Fi skirmish scenarios, small unit missions for use with your favourite wargaming rules, is perfect for fans of sci-fi tabletop wargaming. John Lamshed is an experienced gamer, game designer and author, and brings his experience to bear in this compact little book, offering a variety of skirmish scenarios that can be adapted to almost any set of wargaming rules. Now, I think the book can best be described as a toolkit for wargamers who are seeking inspiration for small unit skirmish missions in a sci-fi setting. Rather than offering a set of specific game rules, the book is system agnostic, meaning that players can use it alongside whatever rule set they prefer. This flexibility makes the book accessible to a wider audience, of course, without excluding groups of players from different game systems. Now, Lamshed provides detailed mission outlines that cover a broad spectrum of objectives, from classic seek and destroy missions to more complex operations involving infiltration, extraction and defence. And each scenario is explained clearly with a focus on narrative driven gameplay, which, if you've watched any of my videos, is something I like to see in games. Now, the book also includes guidance on how to set up terrain and adapt scenarios for different environments, from dense urban areas to barren alien landscapes. Now, the book has a strong emphasis on variety and creativity, so Lamshed doesn't just provide generic battle missions. Instead, the book offers a wide range of tactical objectives that encourage strategic thinking. So some scenarios involve asymmetric warfare, where one side is significantly stronger, but the other has specific goals, perhaps, that balance the playing field. Others emphasise stealth, reconnaissance or survival, forcing players to adopt different tactics that they might need in a typical head-on battle. Now, the missions are also designed to promote replayability, and the author encourages players to tweak the scenarios based on their own preferences, the size of their forces and the terrain available. In this regard, he provides tips for scaling the difficulty of the scenarios, modifying objectives and even introducing random elements to keep the missions fresh and unpredictable. Now, if you've read any of John Lamshed's other books, you will recognise its straightforward and engaging style, making this book accessible for all experience levels. Whether you're a veteran wargamer or a newbie, you'll find the scenarios easy to understand and implement with the forces you already have collected. And the system neutral approach means that no prior knowledge of specific game mechanics is required to enjoy this book. Lampshade also includes advice on balancing missions, which can often be a challenge in skirmish level games where small differences in force composition or terrain can have a significant impact on outcomes. His insights in how to keep missions fair and fun for both sides are valuable, particularly for those who enjoy playing narrative-driven campaigns. So in summary, I think this is a highly versatile and practical resource for wargamers who want to inject new life into their sci-fi tabletop battles. So that's it for this week. As always, please join the conversation in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe and share. And if you want to keep up to date with weekly content from this channel, please tap the bell notification icon. So until next week, stay safe, keep gaming, and of course, keep rolling high.